In March of 2023, we set out on our biggest trip with the SCAMP yet. This was a multi-week trip where we were going down to northern Florida to check out several different areas and possibly find what was going to be our home base for either the tiny house or the RV. But first, we had to get to Florida, and we decided that taking the Cape May Lewis ferry would be a great start to the trip, especially because we wanted to avoid the traffic of trying to go through Baltimore and Maryland. And the Cape May ferry is just a pleasant experience, especially because it was a beautiful day. The sun was out, we loaded the SCAMP up onto the ferry, and then we went to walk around with Redford. It's pretty empty.
What's that?
I've never seen it this empty.
No.
There was so much work and preparation and planning that went into this. It felt really good that we were finally on our way.
So don't let the weight of the world slow you down. And if you search for the meaning of life, it won't be found. So take your insecurities and leave them all behind. Let's learn to make the most of our time.
This was the first time we had Red on the ferry where we actually walked him around, and he was a little unsure.
Yeah, it's windy over here.
He didn't really like the texture of the deck, and for some reason he was especially afraid of the little yellow patches that were painted on certain areas. Sometimes he would refuse to walk across them, but the longer we stayed on the ferry, he got a little bit more comfortable, a little bit braver, and he walked around a few times because he enjoyed saying hi to everybody.
Red! Red! Hey!
Putting the SCAMP on a ship is always a strange thing to me, especially because we just booked this last night.
Yesterday we were trying to figure out our route that we were going to take south. And with southern New Jersey, it's really like a big peninsula. So it's very tricky. You have to either go kind of over and down, or you take the ferry. And at first we were like, no, we'll just drive the big loop. But then by the afternoon we were kind of like, well, Patrick went on and was looking at the ferry. So we decided to take the ferry, and I think that was a good choice. It's a much more direct route to just go straight down. We've already broken something. I already realized I forgot something. You know, within an hour of leaving home, so.
Pretty much.
That's how it goes.
The ferry arrived in Delaware, and luckily we had great weather for our travel day. That was one of the reasons we didn't book things ahead. We wanted to make sure the weather was going to be good. It was about an hour-and-a-half drive to Pocomoke State Park.
We just stopped in a parking lot. I think this is probably one of my favorite things about having the RV with us when we're traveling. Yesterday, or actually last night, about 10:30 last night, I made quiche so that we would have something to eat while we were traveling and I wouldn't have to actually cook. I just kind of warmed it up. And I also made banana bread. Do you want some banana bread?
I'm okay right
Maybe
now.
later. Okay. And do you want coffee?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's make coffee. Good.
Give them some food.
After we ate and had coffee, we continued our travels down through Delaware and into Maryland. If you're staying at Pocomoke State Park, just pay attention to which campground you're at. We were at the Shad's Landing campground, so we actually made a wrong turn. We were heading toward the other campground and we had to do a U-turn. They're on two different sides of the river, so it can get a little bit confusing. At least we got to see the downtown area. It was pretty cute, but then we had to turn around on a slightly narrow road to make our way back to the correct campground.
It's kind of a cool little park here. Never heard of it. Right by the water. We're gonna go check in at the station. It's actually just starting to rain too. It's like drizzling a little bit. Okay, so the store isn't even open. They just leave it out. You grab your little hanging tag here and then off to our site. All right, and okay, important note, if you are coming in here with your RV,
when you come toward the camper registration, this is the first parking lot here. And as we were starting to turn into this parking lot, there's a sign that says no RVs or campers because it's a dead-end parking lot. So go to the other side of the building where the boat ramp is, and it's a much bigger parking lot, much easier to turn around. This is probably super cool in the summer if you have like kayaks or a boat or something. Very neat long dock. We arrived at our spot in Pocomoke State Park in Maryland, and it's a pretty nice campground. It's very quiet. There's only 2 or 3 other people in our loop because it's cold, and luckily there's nobody right next to us because there's another site right over here and then another site pretty close. Right, so if there were people here, like I'm sure in the summer these get full, you can kind of see the next 3-4 sites over that way. So fairly close together, but in the winter it's quiet. And we got the SCAMP set up. The dog is finally tired. He's been like super antsy all day. Hello! And we have electric hookups. So we have the electric heater going. Made some coffee. And yeah, everything stayed in place pretty well while we were traveling, except for the Berkey. That was the first casualty of the trip within the first hour. I had put the Berkey up here with a bungee cord and then 2 like tie-down straps. That fell off. The filter broke, and then I just saw that this whole cabinet door is loose. This hinge is halfway off, and then this hinge is really loose. So the trip just started and we already broke 2 things. That's how RVing goes, I guess. But everything else is pretty good. All the other latches and everything stayed pretty well. So, not bad. And this guy needs to take a nap because he is so exhausted. He hasn't traveled in a long time, so I feel like he needs to get used to it again. So, I guess the good thing is he will sleep well tonight, hopefully. I spent about an hour or so on my phone trying to figure out where we're going to stay tomorrow night. We didn't book our campsites for the trip down to Florida because we weren't sure how the weather was going to be, how we were going to feel, how much driving we were going to want to do day to day. So we're kind of figuring it out one day at a time, and I barely have service. It kind of like goes in and out. So I was able to look up a couple places. We might do a Harvest Host just because I didn't have enough service to actually book an RV site. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. The other thing is that because it's still cold, it was definitely freezing last night, we haven't unwinterized the SCAMP. So I can't use any of the water. I don't have a sink to wash things. So right now the sink is just holding a bunch of our produce and stuff. So the plan that I came up with was to kind of pre-make a bunch of stuff. So I made some chicken and vegetables. I'm putting that in with some soup. The chicken and vegetables are in this little container. I made the quiche. I made banana bread. So the idea was that the first couple days when we don't have water, I don't want to do any major cooking because I won't be able to do a lot of dishes. So I pre-made a bunch of stuff, and that has been really helpful. I just warm something up and then we have our meal. So that was a really good plan. But it will be really nice when we actually get to go down, and we're going to try to get a full hookup site, not tomorrow night, but maybe the night after that. Flush everything through, because we figured out that if we drive about 5 hours tomorrow, we can go to like North Carolina or so, about halfway through North Carolina, and it'll be in the mid-70s. So when we figured out that we could go from like the 30s, 40s to the 70s tomorrow, I feel like our motivation has increased significantly, because then we'll be able to unwinterize, we'll be able to have a little bit more functionality in the RV, and no more like cold. It's very cold and damp out right now, very cold. I was gonna walk the dog. I went outside and I was like, not pleasant. So if we can just go a few more hours south, I think it's going to make just our whole experience of this right now a lot more pleasant. So that's what we're
focusing on to keep ourselves motivated for tomorrow.
We woke up to a damp, rainy, gray morning, so we were feeling pretty motivated to start driving south. Yeah, I know. You don't like the rain. We got a pretty good thunderstorm at about 5 a.m. and it's been raining pretty steadily since. But SCAMP did well. Glad to be in the SCAMP. There's some people down the other end in a tent. Probably wasn't fun. Okay. 4:10. It's pretty good for us. Ready? Okay. Since we took the Cape May ferry to get out of New Jersey and we were hugging the coast on our way south, that meant we also had to take the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel, which is a fun experience, but also comes with a really hefty $30 fee to get across. They just asked that our propane was turned off, and then they gave Redford some treats. That's nice. There you go, Red. Oh, okay. Oh, now he's laying down. Oh, he likes those.
He likes the crunchy ones?
Yeah. Redford is pretty picky about treats, so I was actually surprised that he ate that. The Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel goes across the entrance of the Chesapeake Bay, and this area used to be connected by a ferry, but once they built the bridge, it saves you about an hour and a half of driving around so that you can go from one area of Virginia to the next. And this bridge tunnel combination is a marvel of modern engineering. You alternate driving on the bridge, and then you start to go down into the tunnel, and this keeps the shipping lanes open. So as you're driving underneath here, you're actually going under the water, so there could be ships or boats going right over the top of you. So what is it, just certain points where they wanted to keep the shipping lane open, so then you go under the water? Because we're already going back up. You go through two different tunnels as you go across, and each tunnel is about a mile long. And we came out the second tunnel and continued to make our way over toward Virginia, but we didn't know that this area of Virginia is very congested, and as we made our way across toward I-95, it was some of the most difficult driving that we had to do. We made it through the difficult part of Virginia. It was a little rough when we got off the bridge there. Come on, Red, get in. We stopped at a Love's and we're having food. And I really like the pre-making food because we're eating the quiche again, and then we have some pork that we made for dinner the night before we left. Makes a big difference because otherwise we'd be eating fast food right now for sure. And the other thing I started doing is I brought this extra flat sheet and I just put it on top of the bed during the day because the dog's always jumping on and off. So that protects the bed, which is great. Okay, and then hopefully as we go farther south, we're gonna hop on 95 in a little while, and then we're trying to go to a winery today. I'm gonna call the harvest host and see if we can get into that winery, and hopefully it'll be 70 degrees in sangria tonight. So I called the winery and they were full tonight, which I'm surprised. It's a Thursday night, but I mean, they're right off 95, so it's a popular area. But what I did was I went on the Harvest Host app and found a brewery that's a little bit closer. We're not going to drive as far today, but they had an open spot and you could request it on the app, which is really neat. So I put the request in and now we're just going to see what happens. But that is super convenient. Really nice. Harvest Host ended up being a great tool on this trip because it allowed us to have the flexibility that we need that we can't necessarily get from campground reservations. The nice thing was the farther south we drove, the more we started to see trees blooming and little signs of spring, so that was encouraging us to keep going. Make sure that you are subscribed so that you can come along with us as we make our way down to Florida and find some sunshine.
Well, you worried about you and me. Enjoy. justice, the next president to be. The news and what you hear, your career. It's time for you to face those fears, and it's all fair to be aware, and I'll be there. So don't be scared. Just take a deep breath of air. And 1, 2, 3 to 10, you begin to focus again. And though time flies, we'll have enough to realize this bigger than the both of us.